La Grande y Felicísima Armada, the great and most fortunate navy, was the 16th century fleet of 137 warships and 55,000 men, better known as the Spanish Armada. This mighty fleet was built to face 34 English warships and about 200 armed merchant ships, defeat them, then invade England, overthrow Elizabeth I, reinstate Catholicism instead of Anglicanism, and prevent attacks by English and Dutch pirates against Spanish vessels in America. It was supposed to be an easy victory. It was nothing of a sort. So what the hell happened? Hi, my name is Sebastian and these are mistakes that changed the world. In hindsight, it's easy to criticize the decisions of past leaders and point out what was obviously the flaw in their plans. Obvious for us, of course. But even so, it's rather difficult to explain how the Spanish Armada lost against a much weaker English navy. I mean, you would expect the Spanish to win against Sir Francis Drake and the other sea dogs, even after the English fireships set sail from the French coast. By the way, a fireship was a warship loaded with a lot of flammable materials, set on fire and propelled towards the enemy. And the sea dogs were privateers, basically pirates authorized by the Queen to attack and plunder Spanish vessels. Anyway, Spain lost its fleet not due to the actions of the English fleet, but rather as a result of its own commanders' decisions. In this case, it wasn't necessarily ignorance that led to disaster, but the lack of knowledge and experience that supplanted the commander's skill and intellect. The commander in question, chosen by King Philip II of Spain, was Alonso Pérez de Guzmán, Duke of Medina Sidonia. It isn't known why the Spanish king insisted on this man, since he wasn't a naval officer. He was, however, an experienced army commander, having a very high social rank, administrative competence, modesty, tactfulness, and last but not least, a reputation as a good Catholic. Despite being a capable leader, his failure demonstrates that the abilities and premises that make one an effective leader in a land battle are different from those needed to command ships at sea. In the case of the Spanish invasion of England in late May 1588, there were some things Alonso didn't know. This lack of knowledge caused a mistake that made all the difference in the final outcome. The Spanish Armada was built with a precise goal in mind: to control the English Channel long enough to escort an invading Spanish army from the Netherlands to England. At the time, the Spanish infantry was considered the best in the world, and that wasn't necessarily an exaggeration. They were defeating their enemies left and right for over half a century. If they would have landed in England, these soldiers more than likely would have overwhelmed the small army of English professionals and the poorly trained armed peasants on the island. The only realistic hope the British had was to prevent the landing in the first place. So, at King Philip's order, Spain created a huge fleet of powerful vessels, including about 40 large ships equipped with massive cannons and carrying 19,000 soldiers. Along with the fleet and the men, a plan was also put together: to sail north and join an even larger Spanish army led by the Duke of Parma, Alexander Farnese. The construction of the Armada took months, while the organization and actual assembly took weeks. The English received many warnings in the meantime, so the departure date and the mission were not a surprise to them. The Sea Dogs confronted the mighty Armada with just under 200 of their own ships. Many of these were actually armed merchant vessels and almost all of them were privately owned. But what truly set apart the Spanish and the English ships was the type of cannons they had and the way they were constructed. At the time, the limiting factor in the size of a cannon was its weight. The mass increased with the size much more than the caliber, and wooden ships could only support a limited weight. Each side addressed this limitation in its own way. The large warships of the Spanish were slow, massive, and made of very thick wood. The cannons on all the Spanish warships had a huge caliber but were small in length and range. In contrast, the English vessels were much lighter and more maneuverable. The downside was the thinner wood they were constructed from and the fact that they couldn't carry as much metal mass as the Spanish ships. However, this also meant they could fire small projectiles very far and very accurately. But these projectiles were relatively small and often bounced off the thick walls of the giant Spanish Armada. And size really does matter, because English crews were much smaller and their ships couldn't carry additional soldiers. Thus, it would have been impossible for them to board and capture the much larger Spanish warships. The two military fleets met and fought in the English Channel. The densely packed armada made any attempt by the sea dogs to approach close enough for their small cannons to have any effect on the thick hulls of the Spanish ships a certain suicide. All they could do was to avoid the bombardment by keeping their distance. By maintaining a tight and disciplined formation, the invincible armada was able to navigate the channel in an orderly fashion under the constant but ineffective fire from the English. The cannons of the armada also fired, but they failed to hit the English vessels since most shots either fell short or missed their target. Even though the Spaniards' goal was not to destroy the English ships but to transport an army across the channel, this first engagement was a win for the armada. And since the English failed to prevent them from sailing up the channel, it really seemed like they also won't be able to stop the invasion at all. England was doomed, and the Spaniards were ecstatic. The battle had depleted a significant portion of the ammo from both sides, but neither knew how much the other side had left. And then the weather suddenly turned for the worse. For the Spanish captains, who were more accustomed to the calm waters of the Mediterranean, a storm in the English Channel with the rocky French coast nearby was a terrifying threat. Even the English withdrew to give themselves more room in the open sea. The Armada anchored for shelter off the coast of France near Calais. The ships maintained tight formations and anchored closely to one another for mutual protection. There were only a few dozen meters between them when, surprise surprise, the first English fireships appeared. Fire was one of the greatest fears for any sailor in the age of wooden hulls and sails. Almost every element of a ship was inflammable. One spark could wipe a ship out of existence within minutes. Cutting their anchors, the Armada ships retreated as fast as they could from the tar-covered, likely filled with gunpowder, fireships. This swift retreat of the Spanish meant that mutual protection was lost, and their formation was broken. They found themselves scattered in the storm, with some ships too far away to be supported by the others. Seizing their chance, the English sea dogs, including Francis Drake, gathered in groups of 3 to 10 vessels and attacked the isolated warships in packs. Over a dozen large Spanish galleons were sunk, and many of the remaining ones were captured before the Armada could regroup into an effective defensive formation. The Spaniards were no longer ecstatic. A decision had to be made about what to do next. The remaining 30 larger vessels could still probably have escorted the Duke's army across the channel. And the vessels captured by the English would not be ready for combat against their former owners anytime soon. England could still be conquered. Even if they had to wait a few more weeks for the Duke of Parma, the plan could still work. But Admiral Alonso made a different choice. Seeing that the ammunition was running low and that the Armada had no means of resupply, he suspected that the English resources were also depleted. The English had effectively used their last ammunition in the attack of the isolated ships. However, the Spanish Duke was not willing to bet on that assumption. Perhaps the idea of seeking refuge again near the French coast, with the English sea dogs lurking nearby, did not appeal to him. So the decision was made to abandon the invasion and sail back to Spain. Now, up until this point, no one had made any serious mistakes. The strategy might have worked, but the Spaniards couldn't have known of the enemy's severely depleted ammo stores. So at this point, Alonso Perez made a mistake that cost Spain its entire fleet. The main body of the fleet had very little ammunition left, considering that they had already lost many warships. Next to them, and between them and Spain, there was a practically unharmed group of English vessels whose resources were unknown. If their resources were as limited as theirs, the Spaniards could easily overpower them on their way back to Spain. However, if the English had managed to reach their nearby ports and replenish their ammo supplies, then sailing directly towards them would guarantee the loss of the entire armada. So, the admiral chose the opposite direction. He ordered his experienced sailors, but who were accustomed only to the calm and warm waters of the Mediterranean and South Atlantic, to navigate north and return to Spain by circumventing Scotland and Ireland. Now, if the Armada had been a marching army with a chance to retreat without facing opposition, this order would have made perfect sense. Looking at the maps, for a land-based commander like Alonso, the decision probably seemed excellent. But the Armada was not an army choosing a different path of retreat. This was a navy fleet sailing into unknown waters, waters where the weather was crucial. And as you might already know, the weather in the North Sea is mightily unpredictable. A seemingly safe route, perfect for an army, turned into a disaster for the Armada. In the cold northern waters, and after nearly 2 weeks of storms, less than half of the remaining vessels in Spain's Armada made it back to Spain. The admiral's decision to avoid the sea dogs and take the safe northern route was a mistake that radically changed history. It marked the beginning of the era of English dominance on the world seas and the start of the decline of the Spanish Empire. Too much of Spain's wealth had been spent on the seemingly invincible Armada, and with the effective loss of control over the seas, the flow of riches from the Indies began to dry up. This, of course, wasn't the sole cause of Spain's economic collapse, but within decades of the Armada's northward turn, Spain was replaced as the greatest power in Europe by the English. I hope this video was interesting enough to have inspired you to look into it further on your own. If you liked it, leave a like and subscribe. You can leave your comments downstairs, and you can also check out my Patreon page if you want to support me. I do hope to see you next time. Bye.